Hello, my name is Johnny Richardson. I'm part of the team at Gecko, and a warm welcome to the Gecko Events Training. Now, it's worth saying that this session is very much designed for system administrators and users who are wanting a full understanding of everything in Gecko. How do we set up contact fields, import people? How do we create email communications and templates, set up events, and everything involved in between? If all you're looking to do is build some events on an account that's already pretty much set up with the integration and all, it may be that our Getting Started user guide, which is linked below in the article, might be a better starting point for you, because this is going to be a slower, more methodical look at absolutely everything. That said, if your interest is piqued, if you want to watch along, you're more than welcome to. A second caveat before we jump into everything, because it's good to be transparent and upfront, Gecko's events are really quite complex in what they can cover. We manage both physical as well as online and hybrid events. Now, just for the sake of brevity and time, in this video we're going to be focusing exclusively on in-person or physical events. That said, if you're only interested in doing virtual events, we've got a link to, again, some really helpful articles with videos walking you through how to set those up. And even if you don't mind kind of putting aside that online element for a wee while, a lot of the lessons that we're going to be learning in this particular training video will apply absolutely to you. So you may still get an awful lot just by watching. That said, there's a lot to run through, so let's jump right into it, and we're very excited to start. Now, if this is your first ever time logging into Gecko and seeing the system, you're in for a treat because it's extraordinarily easy to use. On the left-hand nav bar, we can navigate between all of the different sections in Gecko, so we can view all of our contacts, all of the responses to our event booking forms. We can view and read any text message or email that we've ever sent, any call we've made. We're going to be spending quite a lot of time, as you can imagine, in settings, because we're going to imagine, for the sake of this video, that we're starting with a blank account. So we've got a lot of things to set up to get going. We have our events, where we manage all of our events, forms for forms, and then some other different areas of the system too that we won't be touching on in such detail today. In addition to this menu here being collapsible and expandable just by clicking the button here, another really useful thing just from a navigation perspective is knowing that clicking your name in the top right hand corner enables you to view some really useful features. For example, we have the Gecko Academy, which is the home to a lot of really useful information. Almost everything we're going to be covering today, it lives in the events area, but we've got a ton of other useful things. And a good feature to call out is the fact that you do have a search bar here. So if there's something in particular that you're looking for, let's say you can't quite remember how wait lists work, just type it in, hit return, and you'll find the article right away. If you are more of a people person though, and if you'd rather just bounce ideas off of someone, you've got the ability to contact support too. I can't overemphasize this enough, I should say. Reach out to us if you have any questions. If you need us for anything, if you want some ideas, we've worked in the higher ed industry alone for the last 10 years. We don't work in any other sectors, so we've almost always come across a certain situation before in the past with another one of our wonderful clients. So we're always happy to share advice. So contact us. The only thing we ask for in return is gifts, because we love gifts. They make us smile. You do also have the ability to view here any product changes, the service status, update your user settings, and submit feedback. And a lot of what we're going to see today is actually a direct result of people saying, hey, this is good, but this would be better. So let us know what you think could improve the system. Okay, let's jump into it then. So over the course of this video, as we've said at the very beginning, we're going to be building an in-person event. And there's a few things we want to do. We want to build maybe, let's say, a campus tour, for example. It's going to be a fairly simple in-person event, but we want to have a few different sessions. We want a morning session and an afternoon session. We want to send out an email and a ticket to the student. We want to send them a reminder. We want to scan people in and mark them as attended on the day itself. So there's a lot of ground that we're going to cover for a relatively simple event. And we're also going to make sure that we're building this event multiple times, maybe for an entire month worth of events, just so we can see how we can repeat things and how we can use our templatized events in the future. Now, we're going to get started, as you can imagine, if we're building an event, by going to events here on the left hand side, and this is going to be a log or a table of all of the available events that we have on the system. Now, this can be filtered We can search by the name of the event. We can search by the date, whether or not it's syncing with our CRM, or by event category. You've also got a number of tabs that we're going to be looking at over the course of the video at the top here. But the crucial thing to note is we've got our events here, and you can see when they start, the time zone they're in, and how many students are currently signed up. There are two different ways to create events in Gecko, one of which we're going to go into in a great deal of detail, which is manually building them, but you can also choose to import these from a CSV file. Again, there's a link down below to teach you all about how to do that if that's a preferred method of yours. All of the call to actions in Gecko are in the top right hand corner, so for building our first event, we're going to go again to Events and click New Event in the top right hand corner. Now it's quite straightforward here. We've got a very simple step-by-step wizard to go through all of the different bits of functionality. Let's begin by giving our event a name, and we'll call this the Academy Video Campus Tour. Maybe not video, because that sounds strange, but Academy Campus Tour maybe sounds a bit less strange. We have to choose a start date and an end date, and events can last weeks, months, years if you want, or the majority of the time we just see them running as a one-day instance. By default that'll be 9 to 5, but you can customize this and change this. Specify the time zone. All times shared with students from your event will be shown in this time zone, and it'll be made clear that it's this time zone as well. And you can choose an optional registration closing date. So for example, do I not want anyone signing up to my event maybe like 24 hours in advance of it? It can be left completely blank though. Let's go to the next step, and we get to one of the most interesting questions that fundamentally shapes how our event is going to look, and that's this: what type of event are you holding? And Gecko supports 3 different types of events. There's a single event, and the best way of thinking about these is, how does this look to a student when we're sharing the event with them? Well, with a single event, we say to the student, you have a decision. Do you want to come or not? It's a bit binary, yes or no. Are you coming or are you not? We then have single sessions, which is the type of event we're going to go with for our event, because we're going to say we have an event called the Campus Tour. We then have 2 different sessions in it. We have the morning session and the afternoon session. Pick one single session. We don't want you coming to both, although that would be very enthusiastic of you. Only pick one. You then also have the multiple session. As you can imagine, this is where we say this is maybe more useful for an open house or an open day, depending on which side of the pond you're on, where we're saying lots of things are happening. There are potentially tens or even hundreds of sessions. You pick the ones you want to attend. But let's go for single session for the time being. We can also choose to assign this to a category, and we're going to see how this comes into play. Categories can be created just by typing in a word. We could say this is a tour, and they come in really helpful later on in the training when we're going to actually come to sharing our events. We'll be able to say, instead of just sharing the event on this day and at this time with this name, share all the events that happen to share this category. So it's an easy way of sharing multiple things. Okay, let's move on to the next section. And again, regrettably, we're not going to have time to go through virtual and hybrid, but as long as you're running a session, you have options for both of these. If it's a single type event, then it would just be venue or virtual you could choose between. But with a venue-based event, we get a lovely bit of functionality, which is the ability to choose a venue address. So where is this taking place? And this integrates with Google Maps. So we could say, for example, Edinburgh Castle. This is taking place in the lovely Edinburgh Castle. If you're not familiar with Edinburgh Castle, look it up, because it is a beautiful thing. So we'll say this is where it is. This is exactly on the map, and we can maybe tweak where the pin is. We could say, actually, that's not quite where it is. It's going to be just there. Perfect. Let's go ahead and hit save. And this is now a... in fact, we have 2 versions of it because I've done one of these before, but this is now a venue address we can use across multiple events in the future very easily. Let's move to the next section, which is the attendee management. And here we have the ability to tell Gecko, do we want to set a maximum number of people who can attend the overall event? And also, there's a dynamic wait list built into Gecko. So a really simple way of explaining this is, let's imagine we set our maximum number of attendees. This would of course mean that only 100 students could book onto the event. But if we enabled the wait list, this would mean, especially for a popular event, If the 101st person came along and booked, they would be the first person on the wait list. If somebody else tried to book, they would be the second person on the wait list, and the third, and the fourth. If one of these original 100 students is removed or cancels their attendance, then the first person on the wait list is automatically moved from waitlisted to registered, and they become part of this group here. So it's a very easy, completely automated system for being able to manage popular demands at particular events. And the cool thing about this as well is that you can toggle whether or not you want events that are full to be shown, or whether or not you want them to be visible as waitlisted. We're going to leave this blank for the time being, but it's really good to know that this functionality is there. You also have the ability to choose to allow students to bring guests, and specifying a hard capped amount. And we do count, it's worth noting that we do count these guests towards the maximum attendees. So for example, if we set a maximum attendee limit of 10, for example, and we allowed students to bring 4 guests, then theoretically you could have 2 students each bringing 4 guests that would max out the attendance. The way we think about guests essentially is, and maximum attendance is, if you say this room can only hold 100 people, it doesn't matter if it's 100 guests or 100 students, it can only fit 100 people. Okay. Another useful thing to note is that any event can be branded. You can write a description about it. You can choose to add event hosts, which give you information on the people who are going to be speaking there. Hosts can be managed very much in line, where we're adding a biography, uploading a picture for them, including any social media links as well. So a lot of customization that can go into here, in addition to being able to brand what color the student's RSVP page is, what color the event appears when it's on the event field. And again, these are terms I'm throwing out here, and you may have no knowledge of seeing them before, but don't worry, we will get to all of these. The good thing to note though is that we can brand these, and in usual fashion, because it looks fun, we'll go electric pink, because why not? Finally, you do have an advanced settings section, which allows you to do things like integrating your RSVP pages and event sharing pages with your chatbot or live chat. But for the sake of brevity, let's call this quits, and let's just click create event. Okay, our event is now created. And one of the really lovely things about Gecko as a fail-safe mechanism, not just across events, but all of the other parts of the system, is that if you made a mistake or if you need to change anything, you can go back to edit and you can change anything that we covered just now. If you think, oh my goodness, I chose single session, it should have been multiple, or goodness, it's not taking place at Edinburgh Castle at all, I forgot it, that was a fever dream, this is taking place online, you can choose to switch that with no problems whatsoever. Now, we have an event. We told Gecko that we're going to be running a single session event. So the prudent thing to do next would be to build those sessions. Remember, we're running a campus tour. We want a morning session and an afternoon session that students can book onto. So let's go to the sessions tab and we'll see. Sadly, there are no sessions to show, but let's fix that. Again, the call to action in the top right hand corner. Let's create a new session. So let's call this our morning session. And we'll tell Gecko that this runs from 9 until 12. And again, you have an optional registration closing date for the session level. Let's go ahead and hit save. And we'll add some tags. We'll say this is a tour. We'll add a wee description for the event itself. And we'll say that it's myself who's going to be hosting the event. I can choose to go to the times tab. And this is an interesting one. Currently, our session is starting at 9 and finishing at 12, but it may be that in reality, we actually have 3 different tours. One that starts at 9 and finishes at 10, another that starts at 10 and finishes at 11, and a third that starts at 11 and finishes at midday. It's entirely up to you. You can add as many of these times as you want, and these are going to be times grouped under this session within the event. Let's go to the locations tab. And let's say that this particular event is maybe taking close by to Edinburgh Castle, but in a slightly different location. We can also choose on the session level to set a maximum number of attendees. So per tour, how many students would we be wanting? Let's say maybe we only want a maximum of 20 per time slot within the tour. And again, each session can be styled in a different way. We can upload different images and the like. Okay. Now we've hit save, we can see that our session appears here. We can see we're expecting a maximum of 60 people across our different times, and we can choose to expand this session and see how many people at a glance have booked onto each of these individual times. Let's go ahead and we could edit this session if we need to. We could clone it or remove it. Let's clone this session and let's make an afternoon session now. And for this, I'm going to be a little bit lazy. I'm going to say it starts at 12, it finishes at 5, but this time in the afternoon we want to be a little bit easier going on ourselves rather than running 2 or 3 different. I think we had 3 different sessions, different times rather, running in the afternoon. In the morning, sorry, I'm trying to concentrate and do this at the same time, and multitasking is failing me. We'll make it a bit easier for our tour guides. We'll say that they've only got 2 different sessions to run in the afternoon. But other than that, we'll slightly different information. We'll have a different colleague who's running this particular tour. We'll add a tag and we'll see how that comes into effect. Again, let's have a slightly different location. We'll have this maybe back up at the castle for this particular tour. And we'll leave the attendee limit as exactly the same. Perfect. Oopsie. The only thing that I did there that I've missed is that we have the word copy still from when we cloned that original session. So great, we have our 2 different sessions now. We have our morning session with 3 different time slots. We have our afternoon session with 2 very different time slots. And I think I've messed those times up. So let's very quickly change that. Let's say 4, let's say 12 until 2. There we are. Wonderful. Okay, now we have our sessions. It's time for us to work on our communications. So we've got, just as a quick recap, we've logged into the system. Already you've learned where different parts of the system are living. We've gone to our events. We've built our very first event and gone through the settings. And we now have 2 different sessions for our morning and afternoon sessions. What we want to do now is to really create that comms flow, pre-build all of the communications that need to go out to a student when they register, and a reminder ticket as well that we want to send to them. Now, workflows in Gecko are extremely easy. If we click into add workflow, you have a condition at the top, which is where you tell Gecko, look out for these things and these circumstances, these conditions. And then we say, at this time, so immediately when this condition is met, if somebody joins this event, do these things. And there's a ton of different actions that we can have here. And what I want us to do is to be able to send an email and a text. Let's blend our communications, because we can, in a really meaningful and effective way. But of course, in order to be able to send an email out through Gecko, we need an email template and we need an email address to send this from. To send a text message, we need a text template, and we also need a telephone number to send this from. So let's take a step back from our event for a moment and actually go through building those communications in the system. Now, fortunately, they're easy to manage. They can all be done by going to settings on the left-hand side here, and our templates can be managed by going to email and SMS templates here. Here we get a table of all of our event communications, and I'm not going to cheat, although it's tempting to. I do already have some built that we could pre-use and clone, which is really helpful once they're already here, but it's worth saying that we'll be doing this from the beginning of the get-go, and you can filter this table by the type of communication and also the category of communication template that you've assigned to your message. To build a new template, click New in the top right-hand corner and choose between an email or a text message. If it's an email, you get 3 different flavors of email builder. Now, it may be that you're not seeing the drag and drop option. It's worth saying that that's only available to those with our mass emailing and texting broadcasts capability. It's a really nice template. We'll shy away from it just on the off chance that you don't have it. It's worth saying as well that although this is specifically saying import HTML, both the drag and drop and the basic editor also allow you to import HTML and copy and paste it if you have pre-built lovely looking templates from elsewhere. Let's choose to build our first email then. So we're going to say to Gecko, it's an email. We're using our basic editor, and then we want to go ahead and give our template a name. So we'll call this the Academy Campus Tour email. And we'll give this a subject line as well. The good thing to note is that this does support emojis, which I think is always the most important thing. So good job for signing up. And it's also worth saying as well, we're jumping ahead a couple of seconds here, but you can dynamically put in the student's details. We could say, automatically throw in the student's full name in the email subject line, or just their first line, or the name of the event. We can dynamically add a ton of content to the subject line. Let's go ahead and hit the next button, which brings us to our email builder. And here we can compose our message. So, hi students, thanks for registering for our event, which takes place on this date. Here is your ticket. Kind regards, Gecko University. Perfect. So a very ugly template, but a few things to call out here. Firstly, we can beautify this. We have some rich text editing options. Secondly, if you have a pre-built template from elsewhere, you can actually choose to just copy and paste your HTML directly in here, hit OK, and that will render in the window, and you can make any changes thereafter that you need to. Now, we can do some things to really make this a lot more glamorous. So for example, at the minute, saying hi student is very, very impersonal. That's very bad industry practice, and I would avoid doing it at every cost. We could say hi there, or hi y'all, or whatever we wanted to, but it's much better if we actually say the student's name. And for that, if you've used this before, you'll be super familiar with it. If not, there are things called template tags, and this basically tells Gecko, in this little space here, I want a certain bit of content dynamic and relevant to the person I'm sending this to. And we can actually use this by going down here, clicking template tags, and saying to Gecko, I want you to go to the contact. Go to the contact module, and when you're there, look for the full name of the person we're sending this to. And then, instead of just the full name, I actually want to refine this. I want the first name only, and then I'm going to hit the plus icon here. And we can see that Gecko's dynamically generated this syntax here, contact.fullname, first name. Go to the contact module, find the full name, just bring me back the first name. Really nice and easy. And the cool thing about this though as well is that we can actually say, rather than saying thank you for registering for our event, we could actually say the name of the event that we're using. So instead of going to the contact module, go to the events area, and there look for the title of the event. Perfect. And the beauty of doing this is you can build very simple communications which are going to be relevant for every single event that you build, because you're dynamically referencing information. So which takes place on, instead of this date, we can say go to the events module and look for the start date. And we could choose which format that's in. So do we want it to be in long form? Do we want it to be in international? Do we just want to pull in the time? We'll go for the full date in 24-hour time in this regard. I'll make it bold as well, just so it makes it super clear when we see it. But you'll see there's a ton of different things that we could pull into these email messages or text messages. The title, the description of the event, closing date, the time zone, the location, the country, the link to the RSVP page, a QR code, their status, how many guests they said they were bringing, the link to any webinars, any URLs for our virtual events. There's a ton of different tags you can play with. There's actually a link down below, again in the table just below the video, with a list of pretty much every template tag. It's a really good resource to have, and it'll give you an example of what it does, what it looks like, and how to use it. The final one though, and the most important one that we've saved for last, is that here is your ticket. Gecko supports RSVP pages, which allows students to manage their own booking, change their own guest counts, cancel if they need to, change sessions if they want to, and also provides them with a QR code ticket. So if you remember just one thing from this, other than the student's name, it's this event.rsvp_link. And we actually want to anchor this in a word. So we're going to say, here is your ticket. And if they click the word ticket, we want them to go to whatever link or URL is generated by this tag. And this ticket is unique for each student who receives this message. Okay, super, super simple. We've got our email set up. I'm actually going to copy some of this. In fact, let's copy all of this and we'll make a really quick SMS message because it's very similar. So for SMSs, we're going to, again, settings, email and SMS templates, new template, and we're going to create an SMS. We'd call this the Academy Campus Tour SMS. We're going to click next, and you can see we don't get any of the fancy rich text editing options, but it looks largely the same. Now, a few things to point out about this. One, you have a character counter. Don't worry about going over there. The maximum limit is something like 16,000 characters, but my goodness, why don't send messages anywhere near that big, because texts are effective because they're small and short and to the point. So it doesn't make any sense to do so. But it is worth pointing out, if we do go over this, it's going to be charged or marked as multiple texts that are being sent, but it will stitch them together. So to the student, it'll look as if it's just one message that's being sent. Now, you may have a question about consents, like how do students opt out? Consents are very complex. In all honesty, we could probably spend about 20 minutes talking about them in Gecko. Rather, I think the sensible thing to do, again, is to link to an article below which goes through everything you could ever possibly want to know about consents and more. It's useful to point out, though, as the eagle-eyed of you may have seen, you do have the ability, and it mentions in this description text, you can say, it's good practice to say, if you want to opt out, then respond with stop, for example. Oh, I've just noticed that we don't have our RSVP page here, so event.rsvp _ link, because of course anchoring doesn't work in text messages. If you want to opt out, then respond with stop. Perfect. Okay. So our text message is good to go. It is worth pointing out as well, sorry, just on a quick tangent there, went on a quick tangent. If somebody does respond with stop, it will automatically flag their number as being ineligible to receive future messages from the telephone number that sent this text message. So even if you tried to send them a message, Gecko just wouldn't let you. So there's a lot of fail-safes in place, but again, learn more in the consents article below. Okay, let's quickly recap what we've done. So far, we're about 20 minutes in, and you've learned a lot. You've done fantastically. We've learned how to navigate throughout Gecko, how to get help. We've learned how to build events, the different types of events that you run, locations, guests. We've built some sessions. We've built an email tag. You're familiar now with contact and template tags, and we've talked a little bit about consents as well. Now, although we do have our templates built, we have our email and our SMS ready to go, we don't yet have an email address to send it. And we don't yet have a telephone number to send our text message. So let's get that sorted. Now, it may be that if you're coming into an account that already exists, you don't need to do this step. But if you're starting from blank, this is definitely something you will need to attend to. And we can fix both of these problems very quickly by going to settings. Now, in order to send an email address, we need a verified sender. So settings, verified senders, and domains. And here we'll see two tabs, senders and domains. Now, effectively, if I wanted to add an email address that I could start sending emails out from Gecko with, it's very easy. Senders, new sender in the top right-hand corner. Add in the name of the email sender as I want it to appear in the student's inbox for the recipient, and add the email address I want Gecko to pretend it's sending emails from. So what email address should Gecko spoof? When I hit save, what's going to happen is this actual real-life email inbox is going to receive an email from Amazon Web Services with a big, long, ugly link. That link needs to be clicked. The user is redirected to Gecko. They need to log into Gecko. And as soon as they do log into Gecko, this number then becomes verified. And we can start sending emails from it immediately. Now, for those of you who are familiar with this kind of spoofing and email domain technology, you'll know that this works to a point. It'll be very good for sending emails to students, but if you want to send messages to current students or anyone who actually has a real life non-spoofed at geckoengage.com email address, you'll know that the network will rightly, your actual network, geckoengage.com, will point out, this is a fake email. This isn't a real Gecko Engage email that we're receiving. This looks malicious. I think it's spam. Let's block it. Now, that's a problem because you're obviously going to want your emails to go through to students, and as such, we have the ability to verify a domain. And here you can say any email that ends with this suffix, I want to whitelist it essentially. I want to add as many securities and protections that I can to say that actually no existing real domain, this is okay, we're all right, this is us who's setting this up, this isn't malicious. And once you've verified your domain, you can afford things like DKIM verification, mail from, SPF verification too. It's something that the IT team needs to be involved with. Again, we've got information in the article below on how to do this, but it is something that's very sensible. And one of the lovely things about verifying a domain is you can create brand new email addresses on the fly. So for example, I could create a completely fake email address. We could call this campus tours, and we could say campus-tours@geckoengage.com. Now this is not an email address that exists in real life, but because we have a domain verified called @geckoengage.com, I can create this and instantly it's verified and it's going to look the part. Cool. So we have our email address now set up either through senders or domains, depending on your preference. But we now have an email address and a template, so we're good for emails. But what about telephone numbers? Because remember, we also want to send our text message. Well, let's go to settings and let's go to VoIP numbers. Settings, VoIP numbers, and here we can see a list of all of our available telephone messages, and we need to buy or purchase or procure a telephone number to be able to send outgoing SMS numbers. We can do this by clicking new number. We can then choose purchase a number. We can give this a name. We'll call this the Academy Event SMS. We can choose the region that this comes from. We can further refine our options to choose from a telephone by adding an area code. We can choose the type of number that we want to add. And also, crucially, what do we want it to be able to do? And make sure you select voice and SMS because we want to send text messages out. We're then going to query Twilio that's going to return a bunch of different telephone numbers we can use. We can see their capabilities on the right hand side with the ticks here. So let's choose this one up in Aberdeen, sunny Aberdeen, or maybe not quite so sunny. And we can see here that we have this telephone number that we are now able to use. So really, really simple. As a quick aside as well, if you want to get two-way texting working within Gecko, so we send our text message out to students, maybe it's an on-the-day reminder that says, hey, you've just been marked in and scanned in as attended. Great, welcome here. If you have a question, text us back. Then you have the ability, if you have Gecko Chat, to allow you to do this. You can set up two-way texting. Again, information in the article below. It's a really good system and it's a wonderful way of engaging with students. It is worth pointing out that for the number that we just purchased here, this will only support one-way messages. So you can send messages to the students, but they won't be able to message back. You do need Gecko Chat in order to have that two-way dialogue. Okay. We are good. We are now set up. We just need to go back to our event and quickly set up our workflows. And then we're going to be able to build our event a few more times and then talk about sharing it with students. So we have our workflows. We're into our event. We went to the workflow tabs. We're going to click add workflow and let's set up our first workflow. And this is the registration messages. So in the condition, we want to say if the student joins the event called Academy Campus Tour, this one, and we're going to add a condition, and we're going to say the condition should be their status in the event. And there's a ton of different statuses. We're going to see how these come into play very shortly. But if somebody signs up as registered, then immediately what we want to do is send an email. And we want to send it to the email on the contact record, so the student's email address. And if I hold down the Control key, if I'm using Windows, or Command if I'm using Mac, I can also select other Gecko users if I wanted to have a BCC sent to this user. Or if there was a campus tour team, remember our fake email, if this was an actual email inbox, I could say I also want this team to receive this message as well. So you can send the same template to multiple people. Now, but we're sending this to the student. The template that we're sending is the Academy Campus Tour, and I can actually preview that lovely message in all its glory, including the subject line, and make any changes. Here's the email address we want to send this from, and choose whether or not you want to honor or ignore consent preferences. We can then choose to also, within the same workflow, send a text message. And the template we want to use is the Academy tool. We want to send it from this particular number. And the nice thing about Gecko is you can choose which number you want to send this to. So whereas email is always going to send to the student's primary email, if the student has 5 different telephone numbers, so their number, their parents' number, home number, you can choose which number to target. Very easy to set up. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. So this basically now means as soon as somebody signs up, immediately send them an email and immediately send them a text message saying, hey, thanks very much for registering. Let's collapse this because I want to add a couple more workflows. Let's do a 1 day before reminder. And so for this workflow, we're going to say, if they're in the event, we still want to say if they have the status of registered, so they haven't cancelled. And this time we'll send a template that I think I've already, reminder, it's a 5-day reminder. It doesn't matter, we'll go for this just for the sake of the argument, but we'll say here's the email we want to send. Crucially, what I wanted to show though is that you don't have to send this as soon as they join the event immediately as registered. Instead, we can click this and we can say before the event or session starts, as well as after an absolute date, after a delay. We could say before the event starts, and here we could say 1 day before the event starts, send them this email. A really nice thing as well is if you wanted to get even more granular with this, you can actually clone these workflows so we don't have to change as much. And I really should have done that the first time round. We can clone a workflow and imagine that we wanted to send a 10-minute before your session begins reminder. Now let's head back to our sessions here. We've got a ton of different session times, one beginning at 9, one beginning at 10, one beginning at 11, one beginning at 12, one beginning at 4. How can we tell Gecko to send a reminder 10 minutes before whatever session the student books onto? Well, it's actually just one workflow that we would need to set up. We would have to say, in fact, let's get it set up. Let's say if the student is registered, and we'll say before the session begins, 10 minutes before. Let's maybe send, doesn't matter, we'll send the same email again from this sender. Now, the problem with this email is we're saying 10 minutes before, but the workflow is referencing the overall event. So this is saying, if in plain English, if somebody is registered to the overall event, then 10 minutes before the overall event begins, so at 8:50 a.m. on February 17th, send them this email, which we don't want. Instead, we want something that's going to be reactive to the different session times, to all of those different session times, which they could have theoretically booked onto. Unfortunately, we can change this really easily just by clicking this top line. Instead of saying the event must equal the top level of the event, we can say, actually check to see if there is a session that is in this event. And let's hit save. And instantly, the entire flavor of this workflow changes. It now says, if the student is registered and they're booked onto a session whose time happens to be in the overall event, then 10 minutes before that session time begins, send them this email. Which for me is mind-boggling to kind of wrap my head around, but it's amazing in terms of what it can do. It means that this one workflow means if I'm booked onto the 10 a.m., I get my message 10 minutes before this at 9:50. The same workflow will check for you if you're booked onto the 4 p.m. session, and we'll send you an email at 3:50 p.m. So really clever way of being able to have very clever utilitarian workflows. 10 minutes before session reminder. Perfect. The final workflow that I want to show is that it doesn't have to just be if someone's registered. We could have this if somebody is on the wait list saying, hey, thanks very much for signing up, but you're on the wait list. we'll keep you posted, and if you become registered, we'll let you know. We could also have this based on if someone is attended, and we can say if they were in a session, let's say instead of 10 minutes before, we could say an hour after their session finishes. Then what we want to do is send them a survey, post-event survey, saying how was your session? Tell us about this session. So there's a lot of pre and post event communication that can be automated very, very simply. Okay, let's quickly review. We have our overview screen we're going to be using soon. We've edited and built our event. We've talked and we've composed our sessions. We've created our workflows, including our email and our text messages. We've built an email sender to send our email from, and we've built a telephone number to send our text message from. We've automated it so that we're going to have a range of different reminders in the lead up to the big day. Now, how do we duplicate our work before we start sharing it? Because we're not just running one event here, we're going to be running several over the month of February. Well, that's very easy to do. On the overview page, we can click actions, and you can see there's a few things, a bit of foreshadowing here that we're going to be using later, but we can also choose to do one of 3 time-related things. One, we could clone the event, which creates a brand new event, as we'll see in just a second. We've added the word copy on the end to denote that this is slightly different. We could come in here and change that. So we now have a very different event, and just to prove it, if we go back here, we now have 2 versions of this. And I could click into this, and once it's cloned, I could choose to time travel it. And I could say this event takes place exactly the same time on the Tuesday. And the lovely thing about this, again, just to prove this, we've got one on the 17th now and one on the 20th. And the lovely thing about this is all of the settings are the same. Those categories are going to be the same. The locations are the same. The sessions are the same. The workflows are the same. And they're going to be relative to the event that they're in. My favorite thing is this, though. You have, instead of just manually doing them one by one with cloning and time traveling, you can actually repeat the event, and you can say, all of the times match up. I want another one of these on the Wednesday, another on the Friday, we want another on the Monday, and let's throw in another on the Tuesday, just for good measure. And Gecko is then going to create a carbon copy of these events on these times at these dates. Perfect. Okay. We are now in a position where we can move away from the setup and we can start getting hands-on with the actual using of the events themselves. So sharing them with students. How do we register students, and how do we share these events in a really effective way? I'm going to walk you through 3 different ways. We're going to talk about using event booking forms. We're going to talk about using the event share capability. And we're also going to go a bit old school. We're going to import some students into Gecko so we can see what that looks like, because it's a good skill to know, and how we can manually add students into an event. But let's go for the fun one first. Let's go for the forms. So let's navigate away from events into the forms section. And in the top right hand corner, we're going to choose to build our brand new form. Now, I'm not going to labor the point for forms. We're not going to go into a ton of detail. I'll just teach you what you need to know for this. We do have a full, we have a getting started quick fire guide to forms, and also a full comprehensive forms training as well. So we'll call this our campus tour booking form. We're going to add a full name, email, and telephone contact field. And it's really important that all of your events capture at least the full name and email address by default. I'd recommend making them required, because if we don't have a name and an email, we can't create a contact, which means we can't add them into the event. So really important to include those emails. And you can see I've made all 3 of these fields required. I'm going to hit save changes, and we actually have a form now that we can use at any time. Like, this is a live form I could share with people. The crucial thing, though, and the star of the show, is on the form builder. If you navigate away from contact fields to form fields, and you scroll down, you'll get to the event field that can be dragged over into place. I'm going to save my form, and then let's edit this. Sign up to our campus tour. It'll be fun, really. I'm going to make this required as well, because I don't want somebody filling in their details but not actually choosing any times or events on the form. And then on the options tab for the event field, I can choose what I want to pull in. Do I want, for example, there to only be one event? Do I want to pull in one Academy campus tour? Maybe the February 17th version? Or, better, do I want to pull in an entire category of events. So remember at the very, very beginning, when on our event, we made sure that every single event was going to be part of these two categories. Let's pull in one of those and tell Gecko, I want to use this. We can also say if somebody registers via our booking form, what status do we add them into the event as? By default, that's always registered, but you can manually change it. If we have different times or different sessions, how do we sort them? Do we want to show them chronologically, by which come first, or do we want to sort them alphabetically? Do we want to show full events or sessions, which might be useful if you're not using waitlisting, or do we still want to show them and mark them as waitlisted if they're full and waitlist is enabled? Once we're ready, let's go ahead and hit Save Changes, and let's open our form once again. Here we can see sign up to our campus store. It'll be fun, really. We have a list of available dates, and on the calendar picker we can see which ones we want. We'll book onto the February, in fact no, let's book onto the Monday 20th. And we can see we have our different sessions. We can sort them by tags. Now, stupidly, I think I put the same. Oh, I didn't put the same tag on each of them, which is useful. I can sort them chronologically, alphabetically. I could search for different keywords. But as a user, I can click on an individual row and learn more about it. So I can see where this takes place, about the session. I can see precisely on the map where this is going to be. So too for the afternoon sessions here. We can see Ruby is going to be hosting this. And we've got the other information as well that appears. I'm going to choose a session, and you can see once I've chosen this session, because we said to Gecko right at the very beginning that it's a single session event, I can only choose one time. So it might be the 10 a.m., might be the 11, but I can't choose an afternoon and a morning, which is super useful. I'm going to go ahead and put in my details. And I'll definitely put in my email and my telephone number because I want to receive the email and the text message. And as soon as I fill in those details, I should hopefully be receiving those messages very shortly. Now, when it comes to actually sharing the form with students, in fact, it looks as if I bring my email down here, we can see, yep, here we are. So we can see, hi, we pulled in the name of the student, we pulled in the name of the event, we pulled in the start time, and we also have our RSVP page, which we're going to return to. We can see the student's details are pulling into the subject line as well. So a big, overwhelming success there. When it comes to sharing your form, once it is built, you can go to the Share tab, and there's a few ways of sharing this, guys. The first way is the way that we were kind of looking at, that I just naturally did, probably badly without explaining, by clicking the link at the top, but you have the link to this form. And the nice thing is this link will never change for this form with this ID. So if I go in and edit any fields, if I add things, this link stays the same. So you can safely share this with students via email or text in a great way. You can also choose to share this via a QR code as well. So if you scan it with your phone, it's going to open the form. Additionally, if you want to embed this entire form on a web page, you can come down to the Share section, send this script in either JavaScript or iframe version, and just send it to your web team or your CMS team and say, here's the page I want this on, go ahead and put this up, please. And it means that students are going to be able to fill in the form. Again, same as with this link, any changes you make to the form on Gecko are pulled through automatically to wherever your form is embedded. Okay, that's the first way of sharing our forms. The second way is my personal favorite. It's not as often used as booking forms, but I think it looks lovely, and I'll show you how it looks. It's on the Events section in the Share tab. Here we do things a little bit differently. We say which booking form do we want to use, and we'll choose our booking form that we just created, and then you choose what events you're going to pull in. So too, do you want to pull in an individual event, a category of events, or do you want every single upcoming event in Gecko? Let's choose the category again, so we'll choose Academy, and again you have a web form link like we had with our form, or an embed, so very similar, but the style of this is very different. Here we focus less on let's capture your details and then you choose an event, and it's more great, choose an event that is going to be suitable for you. And the student has a really nice calendar picker here. They could choose events, start dates, keywords, and when they view more information, it's going to show them those descriptions, any hosts that have been set up, locations as well, and then finally it'll take them through to that booking form where they get exactly the same experience. But it is very, in my opinion, it's a much more event-first centric events page feel, which is going to be, yeah, possibly a lot more suitable. So that's the second way of sharing your events. The third way is a little bit more old school in the regards that it's less you putting and casting out your kind of fishing line, hoping to catch a student and that they fill it in, and more you have a big group of students and you're just going to dump them in the events. So I could come into my event at any time, and in the top right hand corner we could click Add Contacts. And here we could choose any contacts on the system. We could filter them as well to say, you know, anyone with this name or anyone who'd filled it. I'll move my face out of the way. Anyone who's filled in a particular form or been part of a broadcast. Crucially, though, sometimes we see this working, and I think it's a good thing to go through. We see people importing lists of students into Gecko for the express purpose of adding them into an event. So let's go through how we would do that. Let's begin by going to Settings and Import Data. We're going to choose New Import in the top right hand corner, and remember we're wanting to import a big group of students, so we're going to tell Gecko it's a file that we want to import. It is worth pointing out here that Gecko does support directly importing groups of students through the API for a number of different integrations, which is why you're seeing a few different options here, but we're keeping it simple with just a flat file CSV import. We're going to call this the Gecko Academy Campus Tour import. Maybe these are students who we captured from another system who told us they might be interested in a tour and we want to invite them. We can say this is a one-off or a recurring import supported via SFTP. And we want to say it's a group of contacts we're importing. Now let's actually look at our file over here. It's a sheet that I've got available. And we've got a range of different columns available here. So the name, the last name, email address, dial, telephone code, nationality, program of interest, year of interest, all of these good things. Now, the lovely thing, or one of the lovely things about Gecko in this regards, is that it does not matter how your import is structured. Gecko's really flexible to your needs. You don't necessarily need these to be separated. If your names are in the same field, concatenated, or last comma first, Gecko will support that. The important thing to do, though, is just download your spreadsheet as a CSV file, and we'll see what the mapping process looks like. So again, settings, import file, we've given it a name, it's a one-off contacts import, and here is the list of students that we're going to be importing. All right, so the very first option that we have then is whether or not we want to skip the first row of that import. Now on my particular import, I do have a list of students, in fact not students, this is a list of headers. It's just a header row, so I would want to skip that. But if your data starts immediately with the first student, then tell Gecko to not skip that first row so that we're including them. We then have a very simple game of matching what is in each row or column with where we want to put the student's information in Gecko. So we actually get a preview of the first couple of rows here that can help with this. So we can see in row 2 we have the values Johnny in the first row, in row 3 we have Gecko, and then engage. And if we come back here we can see Johnny, Gecko, and engage. Super. Well, what we have here then, as we can see actually in the header row, is that this is a name. It's the first name. So we're going to tell Gecko, put this value in the full name and specifically in the first field. And you can see here, this is why we're saying it doesn't need to matter what your spreadsheet formatting is like. Gecko supports a wide range, but for us here, this is just the first name in this cell. For this one then, Richardson, student, and prospect, we have Richardson, student, prospect in the last name. I probably didn't need to show you that because it's not a difficult thing to follow at this point. We're going to tell Gecko this is an email address in the email field, and we then have some other fields where it maybe gets a little bit more complicated, because it's worth saying within Gecko that we support contact fields. And let's have a look at those. Let's see what those look like in the system. So it's settings and contact fields. And these are the fields that live on any contact record that govern what information can be saved, what information can be filtered and queried by. It's the core information that's central to the identity of every contact that's created. And in Gecko, there are 5 default fields that can't be deleted. You can see the padlock icon here. We give you first name, email address, telephone, preferred language, and organization. Everything else here has been built, and it's custom built by me. So I added a level of study, a program of interest, nationality, and so on. These can be created at any time by going to new contact field. So for example, if you wanted to put, I don't know, I can't think of an example of what you would want to add, but if it was something like a level of study, we would just say, here's the name of the attribute, here's the data type associated with it. So what is this going to be, a text single line? Do we want to use something like a field with a pick list with data validation, like a drop down single choice or multiple choices, checkbox or radio? If you do choose a field like that, you can actually create a field options list, and this is where we go on a tangent from the tangent from the tangent, and we can go into settings and field options, where we can say, here is a predefined list of options, where we have option A, option B, option C, that is going to belong to this particular level of study field. And the really cool thing about this is that we support both display values, that is the value that you'll see within Gecko, but if we're doing something like an integration with your CRM or pushing this elsewhere and expect something like a GUID, we can choose to have undergrad as this value, but this is the actual value we're going to be pushing out from Gecko when we sync. In addition to creating these manually, kind of line by line, and typing them out, you have the ability to switch to text mode and copy and paste them over from your source very, very easily and hit save. Or you actually have the option to directly import this from a text file or directly from your CRM as well. We have a number of CRM systems that support this functionality, where we can pull over, match a field, and then pull over the latest field options list for you without having to do any of this. But anyway, the crucial takeaway here is that you can custom create these fields that you're importing into, and you can custom create the different pick lists that they're using. So we'll go nationality, we'll go program of interest, and we'll go year of entry. The final thing just to show for the telephone field is that that's not how you spell telephone, telephone here. I wanted to point out just one little quirk with the telephone, which is that it allows you to capture both the raw number for the student as well, but also how you want to format it. If you're speaking with international students, which dial code should you affix so that Gecko knows which country to be calling effectively using this number? Now, by default in Gecko, in settings and account settings, you have something called the default country. And this basically means if you're importing contacts into Gecko, what telephone number ought they to have? If we're importing 1,000 students and we're not specifying the country code, what should Gecko presume is the default country? So this might be, if we're only going to be contacting domestic students, you would set this to your country. However, if you're also going to be doing a mixture occasionally of international students, on a import by import basis, you can choose to add a dial code that overwrites that default country. So because our account is set up with +44 to automatically assume it's a UK student, it means because this field is blank for this student, we're automatically going to say it's +44, it's a UK student. Whereas for this student, I can see from the nationality there, from the States, so I've had to manually put in 1, which is the US dial code. And for this student, they're from the Netherlands, so it's going to be +31. So it's an easy way of managing it. But again, if you're only doing domestic students, just set and forget, go to settings, set it to your country, and it means any numbers you import, you don't need to worry about dial codes because you'll be fine. Okay, let's finish this up and wrap this up in a nice little bow. We're importing our students. We'll quickly refresh. This should take just a moment, and there we are. We've actually only imported 2 of the students because I can see that one of the students, this one here, was already created. So it was just merged. So instead of creating a duplicate, we merged it into the existing contact, but these are 2 brand new, hitherto unseen students in Gecko. Okay, let's tie this all together then. Let's go back into our event. Let's go to add contacts. And this time, rather than manually selecting the students, because I can't remember which ones were in the import truthfully, let's go to filter and let's tell Gecko, I'm looking for any student who was part of an import that was equal to the Gecko Academy, I think it was this one. Yeah, and we can preview it. No, that wasn't what we called the import. Academy campus, did we call it? The campus tour import. That's the one I'm looking for. Perfect. So we can see we found 3 contacts. Which status do we want to add them as, invited or registered? Let's add them as registered, and we're done. Okay, quick recap, and maybe a good time for a break if you haven't paused the video yet, because we've covered so much ground here. We've gone through building the events, sessions, we've gone through workflows, we've set up all of our communications, we've cloned our event a bunch of times. In addition to that, we've talked about importing contacts into the system, contact fields, field options associated with them. There's a lot of ground that we've covered. We're in a great position. Our event is ready. We've shared our event in multiple ways with students. Next comes the really fun part, where we're actually going to be talking about managing the event itself. So what if a student's details change? What if we want to change any of their details? What if they cancel? What if we need to alter various bits? What if we need to contact them in an emergency? And finally, how do we capture their attendance? How do we scan them in? Well, let's take that first bit first. It's always good to start with the first bit first. That was a silly thing to say. But let's talk about how we can manage their attendance in the event. Now, we haven't really spent much time on the overview page so far, apart from adding students and cloning and repeating the event. But this is really your dashboard for seeing what's going on. We can see the total number of students. We can see the total number of students in each status here as well. Now, one nice bit of functionality is if we are capturing a guest count here, you've also got the ability of toggling between a view including or excluding that guests. For us, it doesn't do anything because we're not capturing guests, but you'll see the numbers change very dramatically to give you a really good visualization of how many students we're expecting on campus, or how many students are registered versus just how many people are we expecting on the day. If I needed to manually change a status, let's imagine Engage Prospects calls us and says, you know what, sorry, I cannot make it. It turns out that traveling from, I think, the Netherlands just isn't going to be feasible anymore. We can say, no problem at all. Let's find their student, let's click there, and let's go change status, and let's maybe move it to cancelled. No problem at all. That's immediately updated and the numbers are reflected. In addition to being able to do this, you have the ability to view any student's RSVP page, which we'll be using very shortly, but actually, in all honesty, you shouldn't be having to manage these, because by giving a student access to their RSVP page, they have the ability to view their RSVP, and here they can make any changes to any of their bookings. So they can see sessions that they've booked onto, they can cancel their overall booking, they can add this to their wallet. If they have guests, they can manage their guest count directly from this page. So there's a lot of really interesting things you can do. Additionally, from the RSVP page, kind of as we saw there very quickly, they can choose to book onto sessions. So for the students that we imported, we just added them to the event, but we didn't actually add them into a session. So we could say to the students, hey, make sure you go to the RSVP page and choose which campus tour you would like to attend. So let's quickly go ahead and do that. Perfect. Okay, the other thing I wanted to point out whilst we're here is that it's a really useful platform for being able to message students. What if there's a snow day, for example, or due to unforeseen circumstances, an hour or two before the event, it's been cancelled? Hopefully that never happens, because my goodness, that's a stressful situation to be in as an administrator, but those sorts of things do happen. Unfortunately, Gecko is set up to really help you in that regard. In the top right hand corner of the event, we could go to actions and we could just choose email attendees, and anyone who is registered or attended is going to be pulled in. So our 3 contacts, you can say, here's the email address we want to send from campus tours. We could use a pre-made template, or we could just type one out and say, arg, it's cancelled, don't come to campus, and send it to everyone. You've also got the ability to mass text people as well, so we can select our students, actions on selected, and we can choose to do a really similar thing. We can choose to send text messages if needs be on the fly. So very simple for managing the event itself. Okay, so we're ready to change our approach slightly now. We've built our event, we've shared our event, we've managed things and comms in the run up to it, and everyone is ready to be attending on the day itself. We're finally at the position where we're able to actually start scanning people in. We're able to start tracking the attendance, which is such an important metric when it comes to understanding the ROI of the event itself. So how can we do this? Well, there's a number of different ways. The first thing to note is that we can go into any session or any event, and you have the option to allow students to self-certify that, yep, I am here. I am here, I attended, I was definitely here, I promise you. And we can see here I just set my self-check-in time on our session for a wild number in the future. We can now see that my session, I have the ability to actually come in and say, yep, I'm definitely here, I promise you. So if you don't have the resource to scan people in and actually do the scanning of the tickets, this might be a really good approach for you. It's something that allows you to manage it on a session-by-session basis. Maybe we don't want to do that for the afternoon because we know we are going to have people scanning in. So for the morning session, again, locations, self-check-in, how many minutes before the session begins should they be allowed to say, yes, I'm here. However, the better way, and my favorite way of doing this because it's so engaging, it just looks so good for different users, is the ability to use the Visit app. Now, the Visit app is an offline data, well, not data capture, it's an offline scanning app that works equally well when you're online or in a Wi-Fi black hole somewhere on campus. It's designed to be super lightweight and work on a bunch of different device types, including Apple iOS, Google Android, and Amazon devices as well, like Kindle Fires. And super easy to set up. We've got an article again below that really goes into the minutiae of it, but let's see what this looks like in a quick run through version right now. Okay, so I've loaded up my app. The very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down with my big finger, just pull down to load all of my current events. Now, this very first step does require an active internet connection, and all I'm going to be doing is saying, this is the event I want to be running. It's going to be the February 20th version of the campus tour. I'm going to download this to my device. And once that's downloaded, I can do everything else offline from here on in. What I'm going to be doing is tapping into the event, and here I can see the location, I can see when the event starts and when it finishes, how many people we're expecting, and those attendees. I can see the people who have cancelled and the people who are due to be showing up. I can also see a breakdown of the different sessions and session times, and I can order those accordingly. So in the morning session, maybe I'm at the 9 a.m. Oh, cool, I can see that there are 2 students that I'm due to be expecting here, and we can further tap into this. We can see it's a different location from the overall event. Now, don't worry if this is overwhelming. Again, like I said, we do have a much more detailed, slower version of how the sessions work. I just want to get to the good bit and the fun bit of showing you how the scanning works and how the app talks to Gecko. So here I'm going to try and use some magic to rearrange my windows in such a way that we can pretend that we're scanning students in. So let's use that to show this information. And which students are we expecting? We're expecting Gecko student, and we're expecting student number 1. So let's imagine that student number 1 has comes along to our session. I'll put my face here because it's hopefully less in the way. And remember our reminder sent 10 minutes before the session saying, hey, remember your ticket. Your session's going to be starting soon. So they have their device up. They have their RSVP page with this lovely ticket. For myself, with my phone here, my app, I can choose to click the scan session button, which opens my camera, and now we get horrible recursion, and we can see that the student's been checked in. I tapped the option to view the attendee details, which allows me to see the number of guests they're bringing, their status. I can manage which sessions they want to be attending throughout the day as well. I can see there are no other sessions that this particular student is booked onto. All very good, and it brings me right back to my camera. Now the app itself is updated. We can see we've checked in 1 student. The student is now marked as attended, and if the app can be configured to sync back automatically, or you can choose, as I prefer to do, to sync it periodically. As soon as that information is pushed back to Gecko, we can see the student is now marked as attended. All of that information is updated, and they checked in for this particular session just by virtue of the fact that I was there ready to scan them. Now let's pretend that Gecko student, who is realistically me in this particular example, is a bit less organized and has lost their device, doesn't have their camera, doesn't have their phone or whatever, and doesn't have their ticket. Well, that's no problem. We can still come to the app. We can say, oh, I can see, can you confirm your email address? Fantastic. Thanks ever so much. Yeah, you're definitely here. And I can actually tap to mark them as attended directly from the list with just 1 tap, or going into the actual record here, I could choose to manually change the status. And this is a wonderful feature request. Now, right at the very beginning, if you remember back, I said so many of the features in Gecko have come from great user feedback, and this is one of them, the engage status. It's a way of denoting not just someone who attended, but someone you engaged with and had a tremendous conversation. And how nice would it be then if instead of just getting a generic email saying, Thanks very much for showing up to the campus tour. Someone who was engaged automatically got an email from the person who scanned them in saying it was wonderful meeting you, because they engaged with that student, and it's going to be a much more memorable situation, and that can be entirely automated back in Gecko, which is really, really exciting. So in short, the app is really super for being able to capture information. It can also be used to change student bookings. So for example, if this student decides, you know what, I booked for the morning session, but I don't really want to go to it anymore. Is there an afternoon session? Well, yeah, that's no problem at all. We can manage existing bookings from here. We can cancel which session they're booked onto. And instead we can say, that's no worries, Johnny. Let's book you on. Which afternoon session suits you? 4 o'clock? Super. You're added to that session now. And do we want to check them in now? No, because we don't know if they're going to actually show up. They seem a little bit unreliable, but this student is now booked onto the afternoon session. And again, that information will push back to Gecko, and all of that information will be just in one place and accurate. So 2 very simple methods there for being able to manage attendances. We have the ability for students to manually mark themselves in by using the self-check-in capabilities, which can be set on a session-by-session or an overall event basis in the, I think it's the locations, self-check-in. Or we have the ability to use the offline data capture app to really, really good effect. Now, the final few things that I wanted to talk through are more system level. It may be a hugely important part of anything is being able to understand the impact your event has. And as such, every single event has the ability to do a number of different things with the data within it. You have the ability to view a dashboard of the event itself, which gives some granular insights into the outcomes, where people came from, the different statuses, and in addition to that, there are about 141 widgets you can use to customize how this looks. Further to that, if you wanted to analyze the information in Gecko, you could actually choose to export all of the data on the event itself or the attendees and analyze this in any systems elsewhere. The final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is a little bit away from events. Again, we've come at this video very much from this is the first time I've ever used Gecko. I want to be using it, so it's important to get a very holistic view of how things worked. We've seen our forms, we've built events, we've shared event communications, we've touched on the app reporting, importing, contact fields, everything. I wanted to talk to you about users and integrations finally. Because a big part is, well, firstly, how do we define user permissions? And secondly, how do we add people? And thirdly, I'm here because I want to get the integration potentially set up. So let's talk about all of those things. Well, the users are all managed by going to settings. You can click the user management, or you can search for either users or user groups. Gecko gives you really granular permission-based functionality, which allows you to define what people are able to do. For example, do you want a group of people who are able to view and update events but not create them or delete them? Do you want them to be able to create forms because you want to share them, but not be able to do things like create other users? Do you want people to be able to send messages and import data into the system but not run exports? It's entirely up to you how you create these, and there's no limit to the number of user groups you can create. Once you have your user groups in mind, go to settings and users to build a brand new user, and these can be filtered by different user groups or by different statuses within the user group. So if it's a pending user, an archive delete user, and to create a new user, we just click the new user button in the top right hand corner. Add the name of the user that you want on the system, their email address, and you'll then have the ability to choose which user group they're going to be part of. There's also a few other really nice bits that you can add in here, such as telephone number and position, and these are fields that can be referenced using template tags. Remember the example we gave in the event where we had a really engaging conversation and we wanted a personalized email from the person logged into the app? That's done using this. We can have the email come from whatever their full name is here and whatever position it is here, so it looks like a personalized email that person wrote. So there's a few things you can do, but realistically, creating users, you only need the full name. The only required fields: name, email, and user group. Hit save changes. What will happen then is an email will be sent to whatever is in this field, and as soon as the user follows the details, adds their password, and logs in, then everything is set up correctly. The final thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is integrations, and these are managed by going to settings and integrations. And this is going to be short and sweet and to the point because we support a lot of different integrations, and these are tremendously complex beasts. We have a really good integration section down below which will break down exactly what it looks like to integrate. So from the setup, what the data flow looks like in both systems, and how you can manage these, how events look specifically and how we can create them, because for some platforms like Dynamics or Salesforce, we've got about 3 or 4 different methods depending on the events module that you're using. So I recommend checking that out for a really granular insight into how all of that setup process looks and how the management looks and how the data flow looks in general. Now, thank you ever so much for watching this video. Hopefully this gives you a good primer and arms you with enough information to get going and get your hands in to the system. Start playing around with things. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to check out the rest of the Academy. Contact us on support if needs be. And we're really excited to see what types of events you're going to be building in Gecko.